Hi friends, me Suze, with part 2 of the Glascock family saga. And so we're going to go back to the days of the Revolutionary War. This is the first edition of a newsletter that was started by my kin in April of 1985. There's other stories in this too, but today we're going to focus on Dr. George Glascock of Moore County, North Carolina. In 1784, the legislature, meeting in Hillsborough, passed legislation that authorized the formation of Moore County, North Carolina. Phillip Alston was appointed clerk of court for Moore County, and Dr. George Glascock was appointed as his deputy clerk of the court. Presumably, Dr. George Glascock, son of Captain William and Esther Ball Glascock, moved to Moore County at that time, as no records have been found that would place him there before that time. But in a deed of gift from Captain William Glascock to John Milton Glascock, son of my son George Glascock, this deed was drawn in Richmond County, Virginia in 1773. And proved in Chatham County, North Carolina's May Court of 1774. Dr. George Glascock, born December 20th, 1743, in Richmond County, Virginia, the seventh child of Captain William and Esther Ball Glascock, the daughter of Richard and Sarah Young Ball. Dr. George married Martha Patty Howard, and from the records of the Register of North Farnham Parish, VA, 1783 to 1814. She was the daughter of James Howard and Mary Skurlock Howard, who were married November 7th, 1720-something, and was one of 8 children born to this marriage. Martha was listed in the records as Patty, born January 31st, 1741. Dr. George Glascock's home place was on the north side of Deep River, adjacent to Ramsey's Mill, a place which was later known as Locksville. This is where Highway US 1 crosses Deep River, about 3 miles upstream from where the Haw River merges with Deep River to form the Cape Fear River. Ramsey's Mill is where Lord Cornwallis had his headquarters for 2 days following the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, while his troops built a bridge across Deep River. His army bivouacked in George Glascock's old field. Dr. Glascock served as a surgeon with the American Army at Guilford Courthouse, and it is his service there that his descendants are able to qualify for membership in the DAR and the SAR. That would be the Daughters and Sons of the American Revolution. Dr. George was certified by DAR for patriotic service from North Carolina. He was a surgeon in the Revolution of the American Army's medical staff at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse between Cornwallis and Greene. Dr. George Glascock and his wife Martha Howard Glascock were the parents of 9 children. In the book, Tale of a Tar Heel Town by Meade Sewell, on page 5 she stated that Dr. George had 10 children, 5 boys, 5 girls. In 1790, Moore County, North Carolina census lists Patty. Now this is one of the 10 children. But all traces of the family by the name of Glascock seems to have disappeared. In the Mews Glascock Cemetery, located west of Carthage town limits, are the forks of County Road 1261 and Highway number 27. There's a monument to Dr. George Glascock, 1729 to 1781. Some think that Dr. George is not buried at this location, but on some other property he owned. The story goes that Dr. George Glascock was murdered in 1787 at the instigation of Colonel Phillip Alston. Colonel Phillip Alston had been described as Moore County's first aristocrat. He was the son of a wealthy and influential Joseph John Alston, who at the time of his death left 150 slaves and 100,000 acres of land. Phillip Alston came to Moore County probably in 1772 and acquired a tract of 4,000 acres of the north side of Deep River in the Horseshoe, which is a historical landmark in North Carolina and Moore County. He married Temperance Smith, and at her father's death she inherited a large tract of land, and the tax records of 1777 shows he had 6,525 acres in his possession. Alston established himself well enough in the county to be elected Justice of the Peace. On May 5th, 1777, the state Senate nominated him, with some others, as commissioners for the recruiting service for Cumberland County. Also in the fall of 1777, he was elected to the House of Commons for Cumberland. He took his seat November 15th at New Bern, where his only recorded activity was that of carrying a message to the Senate. On December 3rd, he was granted a leave of absence to give full time to military affairs. It was about this time that he succeeded, by craft or by ruthlessness, in dominating the local political scene. After the termination of hostilities and the formation of Moore County in 1784, Alston appeared as one of the 8 justices. He, at the time, commanded the respect of his justices and his colleagues. Alright. By his being appointed by them as clerk of the court. This office he held until February 23rd, 1785, when he resigned, promising that George Glascock should act as deputy until his son, James Alston, became of age, upon which the court was to appoint James Alston clerk. Alston's resignation was tendered as a result of his election to the state senate from Moore County. In December 1785, the assembly was faced with the embarrassment of having one of its members charged with murder. Testimony presented to the members' body disclosed that Phillip Alston had been guilty of the murder of one Thomas Taylor. Further investigation, however, revealed that Taylor had long been and continued to be an enemy of the state, and was actually guilty of treason for a few minutes before he fell. Since Colonel Alston at the time was commanding a corps of militia in the service of the state for the express purpose of suppressing the Tories, the committee was of the opinion that he should be brought to trial for this death, and that the assembly should recommend that Governor Caswell issue a pardon to him. Yet, a strong dissentience was entered in the records by at least 3 of the state's most outstanding and honorable citizens. These men felt themselves unwilling at all time to prevent the inquiries of law into so heinous a crime as murder. Governor Caswell's pardon did not close the issue. A newspaper article, typically signed Proculus, was so vehement in its denunciation of Alston that Caswell considered it his duty to refer the matter back to the Assembly for investigation. Apparently, the Assembly let the case drop, as there is no further record of that matter. The smoke had not cleared from this affair when a new fire of somewhat similar nature was kindled. The Moore County minutes recorded February 20th, 1786, that Phillip Alston, in a very abusive manner, treated George Glascock. He said that Alston, then sitting as justice on the bench, Glascock, it will be remembered, had taken Alston's place as clerk of the court, according to his epitaph inscribed on his tombstone at Cross Hill. Dr. Glascock had been a surgeon on the medical staff of the American Army at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. And of course, he was also the son of William Glascock and Esther Ball Glascock, and was related through birth to George Washington's mother. This verbal attack upon Dr. Glascock by Alston was the beginning of a deep-seated enmity between the two men. That means a strong dislike. A short time later, Alston was re-elected to the General Assembly, but his seat was contested by George Glascock, Henry Lightfoot, the county solicitor, and John Cox, member of the House of Commons from Moore County. As a result of their depositions, the Senate Committee of Privileges and Elections found that Alston should be indicted at the Superior Court of the District of Wilmington for murder, and that he was bound by his securities to appear at the ensuing term. Glascock, moreover, submitted an affidavit testifying that the said Alston did make use of sundry threats that if Henry Lightfoot aforesaid should be elected in preference to him, he'd raise a riot. The committee, reporting on December 1st, 1786, did not find, however, that any riot was raised. It was further represented to the committee that Alston had frequently declared that he believed there was no God, and that the scriptures were set forth as a scarecrow to children, and that he had endeavored to corrupt the conductors of the election. On the strength of all this evidence, it does not seem strange that the House ruled Alston ineligible for a seat and ordered a new writ of election. So great was his influence that Colonel Robert Rowan, as had been quoted, that Alston seemed to rule them all. And a great tyrant is not upon the face of the earth according to his power. Rowan felt that it was to be much lamented that about 2 or 3 years ago, no gentleman with the least regard for his character would have kept this hectoring, domineering person's company. Not content with this, a number of citizens of Moore, probably led by Glascock, got John Macon to represent to the Senate on May 20th, 1787, their remonstrance against Alston as the Justice of the Peace. The charges are not recorded, supported by the testimony of Thomas Tyson, representing Moore in the House of Commons. The Senate found that Alston was guilty of part of the charges alleged against him, and from very strong circumstantial proof, he is guilty of the whole of the charges against him. As a result, he was also suspended from the office of Justice of the Peace. 3 months later, George Glascock was murdered. The events surrounding his death have been clothed in a certain amount of mystery, but evidence points to the fact that Alston ordered his slave Dave to commit the crime. According to Moore County tradition, Alston, to establish an alibi, invited the countryside to his home for a dance and took care to establish his presence there at all times. Meanwhile, he sent Dave out to kill Glascock. It is a matter of record that Dave was seized, imprisoned, let out of bond, since on August 21st, 1787, Alston forfeited a 250-pound bail for the now appearance of Dave. At the same time, certain witnesses were summoned to appear at Wilmington Court as witnesses against Alston, and Neil Dowd, sheriff, was allowed to call on Richardson Fagan for 20 pounds for transporting a prisoner to Wilmington. Moreover, on August 23rd, Glascock's widow, Patty, qualified as administratrix of her husband's estate. On December 1st, 1790, the Fayetteville Gazette carried the following notice. Broke Gaul, or Gaul, Gaol, On the 5th INST period, maybe installment, Phillip Alston, late of Moore County, committed as accessory to the murder of George Glascock. All persons are required to be aiding and assisting in apprehending, so that he be again committed to gaol. I think that's jail. Gaol. I'm going to say it's jail. And any expense accrued thereon will be paid by the subscribers. Tradition has it that Alston fled the state and was finally murdered by the same Dave the Slave. The book, The Outlaw Years, by Robert M. Coates, published in 1930, is about outlaws who operated on the Glascock Trace. There was a place called Cave in the Rock. It had a long chapter in the history of river piracy, which I think was on the Ohio River. The book quoted Diamond Islands was still a nest of brigands, and it had been in the days of Kuykendall's courtship. Control of Cave in the Rock had been usurped by a most mysterious gentleman named Phillip Alston. It says about him, dressed in ruffles, broadcloth and lace, he went about the dirty business of scuttling Kentucky boats and murdering their crews. He was supposed to have been a native of Natchez, of the bluest blue blood. And the tale goes that in the end, when his luck crashed, he escaped to Mexico, and there rose again to high dignity, moving still among the Spanish gentlemen, courteously formal, dressed in his broadcloth, ruffles, and lace. Could this be the same Phillip Alston who had Dr. George Glascock killed in Moore County, North Carolina? I'm going to say yeah. And he was a big puss, wasn't he? So, here's a story about murder. And we talked about synchronicities, okay? I'm just going to tag them real quick. A convergence via the waterway. I live right by the convergence in the Missouri, where the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, and the Illinois River all come together. And you know there's a place right down the street here in Florissant where the river runs north and south at the same time. And they say the only other place that occurs is the Nile River in Egypt. Next, the town New Bern. Now, if Glascock wasn't an unusual enough last name, my middle name is Bernadine, spelled Bernadean. December 3rd, my daughter's birthday. And of course, this daughter is now stopping the flow of family to the grandchildren. Another synchronicity of war, right? Next, George Glascock. Wow, my dad's only brother is Uncle George. And Uncle George lived here in Ferguson, where I live now. Last but not least, involvement in what was to be. In my mind, I think that every one of our individual inputs is important, and so now here I speak from my personal point of importance. And what I say here is this. The reason I'm here speaking to you on YouTube is because the story must be told. That's what I was recruited for. That's what I've given my service in. So I will continue to share stories to help people alleviate their suffering and to understand the continuance of spirit and the role that they play in healing their families. Thanks for listening to my story. Subscribe to Suze Pratt on YouTube. There's so many subjects, guys. I can't imagine somebody being bored to where they could only handle a couple minutes. So with that, expand your mind, and I'll see you soon. Love you. Bye-bye.